Yeah, for vice chair. Second. You okay?
I'm more than happy with that.
We're talking about meeting stuff until meeting starts.
We're good.
Ready? Good evening. We're going to call to order the Thursday, November 7th, 2024 Board of Adjustments regular meeting. Diane, could you please call the roll?
John DeLazio.
Here.
Jesse Slosser.
Here.
Mark Ronald.
Here.
Brenda Collinen.
Here.
Tiana Morales is absent. Richard Kasser.
Here.
Alec Hayes.
Here.
And on the proposed agenda, we actually have election of officers before the approval because that needs to be flipped. But if I could get a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Diane?
John DeLazio.
Yes.
Jesse Slosser.
Yes.
Mark Ronald.
Yes.
Brenda Collinen.
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent. Richard Kasser.
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
Great, thank you. The first item of business will be the election of officers. We'll start with the chairperson. Do I have any nominations?
Yes, I would like to nominate Richard Kasser for chairperson, please.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Are there any additional nominations for chair? Hearing none, Diane, could you please call the roll?
John DeLazio.
Yes.
Jesse Slosser.
Yes.
Mark Ronald.
Yes.
Brenda Collinen.
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent. Richard Kasser.
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
Congratulations, Chair Kasser. Would you prefer to take over the meeting at this point or have me finish the election of officers?
You can finish.
Great. We have next up is vice chairperson. Is there any nominations for vice chair?
I would like to nominate John DeLazio.
And I would like to second it.
Are there any additional nominations? Diane, could you please call the roll?
John DeLazio.
Yes.
Jesse Slosser.
Yes.
Mark Ronald.
Yes.
Brenda Collinen.
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent. Richard Kasser.
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
Congratulations, Mr. DeLazio.
Thank you.
And now, last, we have the second vice chairperson. Any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Brenda Cullinan.
I'll second.
Are there any additional nominations? Diane, could you please call the roll?
John DeLazio.
Yes.
Jesse Slosser.
Yes.
Mark Ronald.
Yes.
Brenda Collinen.
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent. Richard Kasser.
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
Congratulations, Ms. Cullinan.
Thank you.
Chair Kasser, the meeting is now yours, and we are at item, I should think be number 5, but it's number 4, the minutes of which there are none.
So Brenda, you can stay in the same spot?
And then I think you have to move down where she is. Yeah.
Yes.
There
You
you
two have to swap.
They are.
And then we'll switch their things.
Okay.
These yours.
Yeah, these are. Okay, do we have the script for the swearing in?
The
Public, or,
liaison or secretary will
Okay.
do the swearing in, so that would be the next item on the agenda.
okay.
Should we swear in now?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Do you want to speak? Please raise your right hand. By the authority vested in me, the notary of the state of Florida, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay. Do we have any comments from the public for non-agenda items? All right, hearing none, we can close item 6, and now we are going into public hearing items. So this is a quasi-judicial hearing, and this hearing shall be conducted in accordance with the City of Delray Beach quasi-judicial rules. The applicant and the city shall be permitted to present their case. The public shall be allowed to speak for 3 minutes each, or a maximum of 6 minutes if the person represents an organization or group of people who are present but agree not to speak. The board members, staff, and the applicant may be allowed to cross-examine a witness. the city or the applicant will be allowed to offer rebuttal testimony. The decision to approve or deny an application or appeal may not legally be made upon personal views as to whether a project is a good project or not, nor may a decision be based on the numbers of citizens who support or oppose a particular project. The law requires that all decisions must be made on the basis of whether the project meets the requirements of law, the comprehensive plan, and the land development regulations. Okay, so we've already sworn the witnesses in. Disclosure of ex parte communications by any board members. No? Okay. Hearing none. Ready to get the project file entered into the record.
Thank you, board members. Alexia Howell, Senior Planner for the record. I'd like to enter 2024-233, and the applicant is here this evening to present. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Perfect, thank you. Good evening. For the record, my name is Christina Valinki of Municipal Backman. It's a pleasure to be here before you this evening. It's been a little while since I've been before this board, so a lot of new faces, and congratulations on the new election of officers. I'm here this evening to present dock variance for the property located at 384 Captain's Walk. And it's actually three separate requests related to the same orientation of a boat lift and dock. So it's a variance from LDR section 7.9.7C related to the finger pier. That same section related to dolphins, and LDR section 7.911A for the boat lift, and we'll get into those. But just to give you a quick overview on the property, it's a very small property, and I'll show you some aerials as we move forward. But just to put things into perspective, it's only 0.1263 acres in size. And it's 50 feet in width, so it is very small and narrow. And that's because it has a future land use map designation of medium density and was developed as part of a planned residential development. So it is a higher density area with a lot of lots kind of in close configuration. So to orient you a little bit more so as to where the property is located, it is on the very south end of the city. That canal there, the C-15 canal, is the one that separates the city of Delray Beach from Boca Raton. So you can see on the north end of that canal, that's the very south end of the city. Here you have the property a little bit more zoomed in red. Again, it's just over 0.12 acres in size, and the width of the property is only 50 feet wide. It was developed as a zero lot line home, consistent with the properties to the east, and the properties to the west are condos that are part of the Pelican Cove community. A couple things that are important as we move forward. This canal is over 200 feet in width from seawall to seawall. So it is a fairly large waterway that has quite a bit of room to navigate vessels. One other thing that is really important in consideration of these variance requests is the existing development pattern of these boat docks and the orientation of these boats. You can see all the way along the canal on the north side, the boats, the docks or piers are oriented perpendicular to the seawall. You can compare that just on the south side where the properties are quite a bit larger. And again, this is in the city of Boca, but you do have a couple of docks with boats positioned parallel to the seawall, and that's because their bigger docks have a lot more space, to orient boats and to safely navigate them. Because this is only, 50 feet wide per lot, there's quite a bit of restrictions in those lots and how you can orient a boat in order to navigate it and safely moor and dock the boat. All right, so going into each of the requests to give a little bit more color, the variance request for the dolphins and the finger piers come from the same section of LDRs. And so for waterways greater than 100 feet in width, the maximum distance for a dolphin or finger pier as well may be installed shall be 25 feet from the extended waterway, from the extended property line, seawall, or bulkhead. So we are proposing our finger pier to extend just beyond that to 28 feet 7 inches. Our dolphins would extend to 62 feet. And then the last variance is for the boat lift. And so in a raised position, it can't extend more than 20 feet into the waterway from the property line or seawall or bulkhead. And we are proposing 26 feet 11 inches. And here we have that demonstrated on the screen. So the dashed red line is essentially where the property line extends into the waterway. There is a dock that is along the seawall, parallel to the seawall within the property limits. And then the purple is or the finger pier that's being proposed. So again, the finger pier is permitted to be 25 feet. We are proposing 28 feet 7 inches. And then the boat lift is proposed to be 26 feet 11 inches from that dock or extended property line. And that's consistent with the boat lift that's existing on the east side of the property. You can't see it on the survey. Unfortunately, we didn't pick up the adjacent property, but you do see the dolphin piles. This is essentially where the boat lift is on the adjacent property for reference, these 4 corners. That's where it exists today. So we are certainly in line with what is on the existing property to the east. To the west is where we have our dolphins proposed, and those are each of the green dots. And what you can see over here is these 2 circles here are the dolphins on the adjacent parcel, so their extended property line, but those are existing already to support the boat dock and finger pier on the adjacent property, and they extend out essentially the same amount. There's, I don't think, a specific measurement, but we're positioning our dolphins immediately adjacent to that. So they would extend no further into the waterway than what's existing out there today. Now, aside from kind of the navigation component and the limited width that's out there that you can use to maneuver a vessel, this property is a little bit unique because of the shallowness of the waterway as well. When you have boats docked adjacent to the intercoastal waterway, your waters are a little bit deeper. It's a larger navigable waterway, but this is a canal that is not quite as deep. And so your mean lower low water level, if I said that correctly, is just about, I think it's 2.86 feet. So when you extend into the mean low water line, you have about 2.86 feet to position a boat in terms of, the depth. When you get closer to the property line at low tide, it goes down to about 1.8 feet. And so that becomes important, especially for the boat lift, because property owners invest quite a bit into their boats and don't want to damage their hulls, want to be able to safely position their boat without having it beached in these low tide conditions. And so we need to be able to position the boat lift and orient the boat in a manner that is able to safely do that without having those additional risks come into play. And so this graphic, again, just shows you the existing conditions to put things back into perspective with the neighboring properties. This gentleman was actually here earlier that lives to the east, and he has an existing boat lift right along his property in roughly the same area. So that is consistent with what we are proposing. Again, on the west side, you can see these existing dolphins. That extends about 62 feet in line with what we're proposing. And so the dolphins we're proposing would be immediately adjacent to that. So we're not having any further impacts to the navigable waterways. We're not further decreasing the amount of space boats and vessels have to navigate those waters. We're basically requesting to do the similar condition to what's out there already, including on the immediately adjacent parcels. So again, just going back to the narrowness of this site as well, being 50 feet, it doesn't quite give the appearance of being so small when you have the zoomed in graphic. But again, from east to west here, if I can get this moving correctly, east to west, that dimension is only 50 feet. And so to be able to safely navigate a boat within 50 feet into that area, so it's positioned parallel to the seawall, is virtually impossible. My colleague was actually out on the property, and he's an avid boater, and was reviewing the site and was basically saying, I don't even know how anybody can manage to navigate a sea-doo, parallel to this dock. And then when you include, wake, tidal, wind, it really affects the ability to safely maneuver and moor a vessel. And so just to recap, I know this board in particular goes through each of the criteria very carefully when considering variances. So I did want to touch upon them again to summarize, because I believe we've provided sufficient justification in the presentation, but just on a quick one-by-one basis, the first criteria for consideration is that special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved, and which are generally not applicable to other land structures, buildings in the same zoning district. And so most of the waterways, or I guess most of the properties positioned on waterways, when you think of along the intracoastal, they are fairly large properties. I used to live in the neighborhood, and we'd see a lot of the massive boats that were on some of the lots, behind multi-million-dollar homes. This is not one of those situations. These are small lot lines, again, 50 feet wide, and the existing configuration of this area just only allows for orientation of a boat vessel perpendicular to the seawall. Literal interpretation of the regulations would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties subject to the same zoning. And that again is evident because all of the properties in this area have finger piers that extend perpendicular to the seawall. They have boat lifts. Again, immediately next to us, there are dolphins that extend 62 feet into the waterway. So we are just seeking to be treated the same way as the other property owners and allow the variances to provide for a similar situation that exists to our even immediate neighbors. I actually skipped C in the presentation, but I apologize. Its special conditions do not result from the actions of the petitioner. Again, the water levels my client has no control over. They bought the property when it was already developed. This area was developed, I think, in the late 70s, early 80s. So none of that has anything to do with the actions of my client. The granting of the variance will not confer onto applicant any special privilege that is denied to other land structures. Again, we are not seeking any special privilege. We're seeking to do exactly what's out there today and to be treated the same and allow for a similar situation as to what's existing. That the reasons set forth in the variance petition justify the granting of the variance, and that the variance is the minimum variance necessary. So this is the minimum variance necessary. Again, we're not seeking to increase or add any condition that is not already existing. When you look at the dolphins, we're not seeking to go any further into the canal, into the waterway area. And one thing I do want to note, because when looking at the boat lift, there is a very large boat that's positioned in the graphic. My understanding was that when we were going through with staff, they wanted to confirm that when we had the largest boat positioned on the lift possible, we wouldn't have any impacts to the neighbors, and we would still be meeting the side setbacks. So that's what that's intended to reflect. But certainly, we're not seeking to do this in order to get a massive boat out there. We just would like to have any boat, really, to be able to utilize this area. And that the granting of the variance will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the existing regulations and not injurious to the neighborhood. And so LDR section 7.9.1, the intent says, the intent is to permit construction in and upon certain waterways of docks, dolphins, finger piers, and boat lifts, which do not cause a hazardous interference with navigation, endanger life or property, or deny the public reasonable visual access to public waterways. So again, we're not going to have any impact to the navigation of the waterway, endanger property, or create any visual impacts. This is really in line with what is proposed by the intent of these provisions as well. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have this evening, and appreciate your time.
Okay, we'll move on to the staff presentation.
Good evening, board members, and congratulations to the new board members. Alexia Howell again. So today we have 3 variances before you at 384 Captain's Walk. Quickly, the variances are for within the dock section. It includes a finger pier, 5 dolphins, and a boat lift. So the property is located at 384 Captain's Walk within the Pelican Harbor neighborhood. It's the southernmost neighborhood within the city on the intercoastal. It's located on the C-15 canal, and it's managed by the South Florida Water Management District. They actually own that portion of the canal. And so I'd like to reference that prior to a building permit issuance, the South Florida Water Management District will need to approve the right-of-way permit for any construction within their right-of-way waters. And to move forward, we have a zoning designation of planned residential development. As stated, this is a 0 lot line development from the site to the right. Those are all planned residential developments, and to the west of that subject site is condos. And so here we have a aerial view of the subject property, a little zoomed in, with the C-15 canal, and just at the border of that is Boca Raton. And so the subject property is highlighted in red. As you can see, the condos to the west and the 0 lot line properties to the east. The canal is about 210 feet wide. That's important to note because in the regulations, there's specific criteria, whether you are less than 100, more than 100, or at 100, there's different criteria. So it's more than 100 feet in width for the canal. As you can see, there are existing finger piers, dolphins, and boat lifts in this aerial here. And currently there are no finger piers, dolphins, or boat lifts at the subject property. But there are some dolphins on the west portion of the property that's not of the subject property. It's the adjacent property, and there is a boat lift to the east of that. And so here we have some photos of on the ground level of the property line facing to the south. We have the property line highlighted in red dash mark just to show where that property line, if it were to extend out into the water, what that would look like. And so to the right of that is the dolphins. And then to the west of that, you can see the view to the east that highlights a portion of the backyard of the property, which is an elevated deck. And then there's steps down to the dock and a portion of the seawall you can see as well. And just further out is that boat lift. And so the property owner is actually wanting to raise the seawall and remove the existing dock and to install a new dock parallel to the seawall and install a finger pier as well as 5 dolphins and a boat lift. So here's the request. The first variance request is to install a finger pier to extend more than 25 feet out into the waterway. And the boat lift to extend more than 20 feet out into the waterway, and 5 dolphins to extend more than 20 feet out into the 25 feet into the waterway. So for the new board members, I kind of created this slide really just to highlight where we at in the LDRs. So we're in Article 7.9, docks, dolphins, finger piers, and boat lifts. Under that section, under that article, we have an intent, and then we also have it broken down into different sections. Each section is laid out as standards of approval for a dock, dolphins, finger piers, and boat lifts. So each section of the code has different regulations for different types of construction into the waterway. But what was more important to me was to highlight the intent of the code. And so in section 7.91, the intent of the code is to allow any construction within the right of ways for docks, dolphins, finger piers, and boat lifts that do not cause a hazardous interference with navigation, endanger life or property, or deny the public reasonable visual access to public waterways. So that is the intent of the code. And just to highlight also in section 7.98 under finger piers just highlights it back to dolphins for regulations. So anything that's considered a finger pier is just referenced back to dolphins as code regulation. Just a little bit definitions to highlight what a dolphin is and a finger pier. Not everybody knows what that is. I didn't even know, so I had to look up and understand what a finger pier is and a dolphin. So we do define dolphins and finger piers within the LDR's Appendix A. So a dolphin is basically a pole into the ground that is used to either moor or dock a boat, and you can tie it off as like a 3rd or 4th anchor. Instead of putting an anchor into the water, you can tie it off, or it's also as a guide for watercrafts. And as you can see, those dolphins are those piles in the water along in that aerial view, and you can see one of the boats tied off on the rope. And so a finger pier is basically a 5-foot width dock. It's just perpendicular to the dock, and it's called a finger pier, and it's basically access to the boat lift or access to the boat, which can be tied off to the finger pier. And so we get into the section of the 7.97C for dolphins. Standards for approval, again, there's different criterias, and this falls into the waterway of greater than 100 feet in width. So the maximum distance a dolphin may be installed is 25 feet from the extended property line, the seawall, or the bulkhead, whichever is nearer to the water line. And so I've highlighted the property line in the red dashed line. It does extend out into the waterway about 8.9 feet. And so the seawall is highlighted in yellow and the dock is highlighted in the light orange. And therefore the property line is the nearest to the water line. And so everything is measured from the property line. And so the request today is for the dolphin is to install 5 dolphins out into the waterway 62 feet measured from the property line, whereas only 25 feet is allowed. And again, the finger pier is referenced back to the dolphins. So the finger pier is highlighted in the green narrow finger pier extending from the dock. And its request is to extend the finger pier from the property line 28 feet and 7 inches, whereas only 25 feet is allowed. And then we get into the boat lift. It's highlighted in blue. Again, it's measured from the property line, and maximum is 20 feet. But the wow, I did that wrong. How did I get so far? And so the boat lift is actually extending out 26 feet 11 inches. Oh, and I don't know if you see those finger piers highlighted in red right now. Those are the finger piers, and just adjacent to those are the existing finger piers of the neighboring property to the west. Okay, so because this is a variance, it's a departure from the regulations. There has to be some findings, and the evidence is provided by the applicant today, so I didn't go into the evidence, but I do want to ensure that there has competent substantial evidence has to be provided to make positive findings, and the findings are listed here, A through F. I will go over them really quickly, but positive findings have to be found to grant this variance, and the first one is that there are special conditions and circumstances that exist that prohibit the property owner from utilizing the property. There has to be a literal interpretation of the zoning code that deprives the property owner from developing and commonly enjoyed by other properties, and there are special conditions that are not resulted from the applicant. And again, positive findings have to be found, A, D through F here. This granting would not be a special privilege. It is the minimum variance that will make possible reasonable use of the land, building, or structure, and that it is in general harmony with the overall neighborhood and public welfare. And so we have 3 board motions for each. We have a board motion for finger pier. We have move approval, move a denial, and move to continue a direction. We have a board option for dolphins and also for the boat lift. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm west of that 384.
Okay. Do we have any staff's presentations are completed, right? Okay. So now we open it up for public comments. So do we have any public comments?
Was he sworn in?
Yeah. And just to verify, you were sworn in, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't stand up, but I
Okay. Okay. So
had
you
problems.
3 minutes.
My name is Michael Eisman. I'm Delray Beach resident. I am west of the 384 Captain's Walk. I have to pass by those set of pilings. My concern is there's no limitation on the size of boat. Rumor has it a 65-foot boat is being proposed. That will extend beyond the piers, the pilings, and it would cause me to have to go further south into waters unknown. Right now, I pretty much hug the pilings as I'm coming up. As it was mentioned, the mean low water gets as shallow as 2-point-some feet, and I drew at 3.5 feet, and I'd like at least double that when I'm going up the canal. Make sure I don't suck dirt and other material into my engines. My concern is no limitation on the size of boat, and that if it extends beyond the pilings, it further cuts down my safe navigation of those waters. So if there's any way in the variance to say no boat's bow or bowsprit would extend beyond the piling, then I would have no issue. But I don't see any limitation imposed like that. They can put any size boat in. So my comment is that the boat should not extend past that piling that is equal to the others. Unfortunately, my boat's not working. I would have taken soundings along there, but right now, unable to do so. So that's my greatest concern, is that I'll be pushed into shallower waters. Especially if there's a boat passing the other way, it'd be further pushed towards the Boca side. So, okay, thank you for listening.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments? Okay. Hearing none. Is there any rebuttal or cross-examination from staff?
I do not have a rebuttal. I just like to state that with the more requests that are coming in for these type of things, staff has requested to illustrate the boat on the diagram, and the reason is because to ensure that there is a 10-foot separation that is required to be maintained from the property line to the boat lift. But we also take into consideration if a boat extends out into that boat lift, just the lip of the boat or anything like that, that it still maintains that 10 foot. And so with the diagram or the illustration of the boat on the boat lift, it shows that the boat will not extend out into that boat lift, and a 10-foot setback will be maintained. I did not mention that, but it is maintained a 10-foot setback as required by code, and so it is conforming right now. And that's it.
Okay. Thank you. And any...
That was exactly the point that I was going to say, so thank you, Ms. Hall, for doing that. But again, this is the largest boat that could fit on the boat lift that's dimensioned and diagrammed on the graphic. So that puts things into perspective in terms of where the dolphins are with respect to that largest boat possible.
Okay. I think we're ready to move on to board discussion. So we can just start from one end to the other. If anyone has any questions.
No, I think they clarified whether or not there is actually some regulation that involves the boat, I guess, impeding out further than is allowable.
Yes, that's correct. Within the boat lift section, there's a 10-foot separation or whatever the side setback for that building in that zoning district is. So this is a 0 lot line development. With a 0 lot line development, it's either 0 or 10 or whatever that planned residential development had at the time. And so therefore the 10 is the greater.
As a follow-up to that, so that applies to all boundaries or just the side? I guess if the concern is that it's going to extend, I guess, forward beyond the edge of the pier too.
It's only the side setback.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if, say, there was no dock or lift or anything, there's nothing to stop someone from docking a 100-foot boat? Is that what he's kind of saying?
You mean like
He says
perpendicular?
there's nothing that regulates the size of the boat, whether there's a dock there or not, or a lift or anything. That's it for my question.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe for William, is there a city code that addresses boat size or how you dock boats or how far it can extend into the canal, and where does our jurisdiction begin and end versus the waterway, the water district?
So it's a good question. I've actually been trying to find if there's anything. To the best of my recollection, I don't believe there's a specific land development regulation that prohibits or limits the size of the boat from an extension outwards into the canal perspective. The board could, though, because I've been looking at it as well, under the variance provisions of the land development regulations, which is 2411A, the board can impose a condition when it's an appropriate condition and safeguards to mitigate any adverse impacts. So it is within the board's authority if you wanted to approve these, but with the condition that no boat would extend out beyond whatever the furthest amount that the board would deem as a condition. I mean, obviously the dolphin piers, if they're approved, the dolphins would be the furthest out point, which would then prohibit, a boat from extending out past that dolphin. But to answer the question directly, I'm not aware of a regulation right now that specifically states that a boat can only extend 50 feet or 60 feet or 70 feet from the edge of property into the canal. It's generally it's limited more by the size of the dock or the boat lift.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I guess my view on that is, and I am an engineer, although I don't know the center of mass of a boat, but I think based on where the lift is positioned, I fail to see a boat that could fit in that lift at that position. And then if we were to grant the variance out to the farthest dolphin pier, which
62 feet.
yeah, which does appear in line with existing dolphin piers, I don't know that you could dock a boat on that lift that would then protrude past that pier. Again, that's a semi-qualified opinion, but I don't know the center. It doesn't seem reasonable that a boat would be that center of mass, but I'd welcome others' thoughts on that as well.
Take your expert opinion.
Yeah.
I guess other questions. So to bring the finger pier farther out, I mean, if the applicant, I don't know if this was to scale or to plan, but if you're planning on backing the boat in there, are you getting that much relief? If the concern is the propeller, or I guess how did the applicant, for the applicant, the representative, how did you land on this particular dimension as the minimum required for safety?
So that came from our engineers that are way smarter than I am at these types of things. But a boat lift obviously needs sufficient space so that there aren't conflicts with the seawall and the dock. So they deemed it appropriate based on their experience, and these are engineers specific to building docks and getting them approved through municipalities and the South Florida Water Management District as well. So really just based on their expertise to accommodate a boat safely on the site, that's where they deemed it was necessary.
Got it. That's all the questions I have, although I guess before we move the vote, I'd be curious others' impressions on whether we think it's reasonable to impose a limit. I mean, my personal view is it's not, and that should be handled by the water district as opposed to ourselves. But
Sounds right.
yeah. But anyway, sorry, I'll pass on.
Okay.
No,
I'll
I'm
go
just
last.
wondering, is there any other neighbors of do they have any problems, any conflicts with any of this going on?
So I spoke to the neighbor immediately east of this property. He actually came in advance of this meeting, and I had an opportunity to grab him for a couple minutes and understand his concerns. And he just wanted to know what was going on, but he said, no, I have a boat lift too. If it's generally in line with what I'm proposing, then I'm comfortable. And he saw the plan, he looked at it, and then continued on his way. So that
he was okay with it.
So he was content, yes.
Well, I'm a neighbor in the neighborhoods, Pelican Harbor. Can I speak?
We've already closed public comment. Can we reopen it?
The board has discretion if it'd like to. I see generally the board follows the procedure, but it is the board's discretion if they'd like to entertain those comments.
Yeah.
Well, let's finish the staff questions or the board questions, and then once we finish with them, then you can speak.
My turn? Or you-
Yours.
Okay. Yeah, I have a few questions. First, an observation. I am an engineer as well. And although we don't make small boats, I ran a company that makes large boats for the military, including nuclear submarines. so I have a little bit of a knowledge about such matters, but not quite at this scale. I'm assuming that there were reasons why there wasn't a dock or a lift there, and that the purchaser, who was not the original owner, as I understand, do you know when he bought or she bought or they bought?
I believe
this
he
property?
purchased the property within the last couple years.
Okay, so then I'm assuming somebody's going to buy a piece of property on the water, is going to consider what kind of boat they can get in, and they're going to look at the LDR, I'm assuming, and be aware of the limitations. And that was probably affected, quite candidly, in the price, because anytime I've looked at property that has a pier, or doesn't have a pier, or has access to the water, they always tell you how many feet and what depth, because it's a selling point, and it directly affects the price. So this person or organization that bought that property, I have to assume, was keenly aware of the limitations. And this is one of the issues in general with regard to LDRs. The LDR is there for a reason, I'm assuming. It hasn't been modified for a reason, I'm assuming. And it's not clear to me, when I look at some of these numbers, I certainly understand the need for the dolphins to go out. I think that was well explained. And as I look at the pictures, there's a lot of others that go well out. But I'm having real trouble when you go from 20 feet on the lift to 26.11, 26 feet, 11 inches. Somebody has a boat in mind that won't work with a 20-foot lift. And there's plenty of boats that would work with a 20-foot lift. Also, when you want the pier to go out 28 feet 7 inches, these are unusual numbers, as opposed to the LDR, which is 25 feet. Admittedly, it's only 3 feet 7 inches, but it's not evident to me why 25 feet won't work. So, unless somebody can explain to me why 25 feet won't work. Similarly, although it was explained that a lot of dolphins are well out there and one boat lift exceeds, as I look at the picture, it doesn't seem like there are many boat lifts or piers that are extending out that far. And if I'm incorrect, I would appreciate the staff helping me understand.
I think this would be a good question for the applicant to answer, actually.
Yeah, and what I can say is, again, I'm not 100% certain as to why the boat lift is positioned in this specific instance. If the board needs that information to move one way or another, we can certainly come back and make sure our engineer is here at the next meeting. It is closer to the property line than the adjacent property immediately next to us, the boat lift that property owner has. So again, it is in line with what's in the area. And in terms of the finger pier extending, I do know it needs to go slightly beyond the boat lift, and that's to ensure that people can walk along it to safely moor the boat, even at those farthest points in the boat lift, and to be able to access the boat lift should they need to, investigate anything, move anything, tie anything up. So, the finger pier does need to extend slightly beyond the boat lift, which is why that dimension is provided at something that's a little bit beyond 25 feet.
Yeah, I mean, the distance and the setback of the neighbors, I think, is important, because when I was looking through this, and you talk about what is special conditions and circumstances, and on the surface it does appear that they're almost the unique one, and that they don't have an exception. If I just look at page 6 of the staff report, it does appear other houses have a similar one. When I think about LDR versus variance, is this almost the perfect reason why you have a variance as opposed to a different LDR? Because this isn't a condition you want to impose throughout the city, but maybe on this wide canal it makes sense in this instance. But you're right, I think if in isolation, if they were extending the boat dock beyond what was common on this stretch of canal, then right, that would cause me pause as well.
Yeah, and it does appear that the property immediately east and then going down, and I just did a quick measurement, and there's multiple properties with boat docks that, or boat lifts, that extend out 40 feet from the property line. So I don't think that this is, and the one next door is a 40-foot extension. So I don't think that in my personal opinion, that this boat dock is egregious, or boat lift, is egregious from a harmonious
It's certainly
standpoint.
I would agree. It's certainly not egregious because, as I said, it's only a few feet beyond the limit.
Yeah. Do you have any more questions?
No.
Okay. All right. I just have a couple questions for the applicant. Now, first, have you submitted for your South Florida Water Management District permit?
I believe it has been submitted and is in process, but it is still pending.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the boat that was shown on the illustration that staff had you show, that is relatively indicative of the boat that your client, the owner of the property, would be placing on there?
So this is reflective of the largest boat you could fit on this boat lift, on this particular, I think it's 40,000 pound boat lift. So my client could certainly do something smaller and likely will, but this is the absolute largest you could get.
Okay. And then could you, I guess, in looking at that, would it be possible to dock a larger boat? And this would be something for my boaters in the crowd. Knowing that the width from the finger pier to the Dolphin is the limit that you have to dock a boat there, to assuage some concerns about putting a larger boat in, would a larger boat that would extend past the southernmost Dolphin, would that fit in that width?
If there was no boat lift there.
Yeah.
But right. But so on the other side, on the west
On
side,
the other side, I guess it depends on the dimension.
I mean, you would have to have it would have to be a
showing
pretty skinny.
18. It's the same
Was
width.
that 18 feet?
It's the same width as the lift. So
Okay.
You can get a big boat in there.
Okay. And then if we wanted to put a limitation, this is a question for the attorney. If we wanted to put a limitation on the boat extending past the Dolphins, how would that be enforced? Since this would be a permit condition, and would it fall under code enforcement to have a special condition to enforce on this particular property?
So the land development regulations state that if there's a violation of the variant, well, the condition's considered part of the variance, and if they violate that condition, it's deemed a violation of existing ordinances and punishable under section 1.44. So in essence, it would become like a code violation. So just as if somebody were to build something on their site that wasn't approved or violated a condition, then it would become a code enforcement action, and they'd be subject to that board and whatever determinations it makes.
Okay. And then would your client be amenable to that type of restriction?
I don't see an issue with that.
Okay. Okay, that answers all of my questions. Does anyone else have any questions, comments?
I just want, for clarity, I know the rules are that within a certain distance, neighbors were informed. I presume that happened. And I'm since we haven't heard any, although this individual may wish to speak, we got no response? Is that a correct assumption?
That's correct.
Thank you.
I guess if we're going to open back up, we'll reserve more comments. If we're going to open up.
Well, yeah, if you're going to allow additional public comment, then we'll need, again, rebuttal and cross available for both of them, and then open up for board discussion. So kind of just resetting backwards a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then if you're ready to speak.
And I believe she needs to be sworn.
Were you sworn in?
No.
Okay, sure.
No, were you previously?
No, she arrived after the swearing in.
Okay.
Please raise your right hand. By the authority vested in me, the notary of the state of Florida, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear.
Okay. You have 3 minutes.
I'm Natasha Lee. I live in the neighborhood, and one of the members here asked a question about when the property was purchased. The property was purchased in about April or May of this year, and it was a complete gut job. So that is the background. And my question or observation is, if what's portrayed here is the largest possible boat, then why does Dolphin need to extend so far out to accommodate the largest possible boat? Because 62 feet relative to 25 allowed is quite a big difference in my mind, not really knowing the technicality. And the other observation, not knowing the details and the sizes of other docks and boat lifts, it just seems percentage-wise, what's being requested is bigger. Because yes, it's 6 feet, 7 feet, but relative to what's permitted currently under code, it's pretty big. That's just my comment.
Your name again?
Natasha Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may add, based on what your comments were, this is today's vote, but future.
Hold on.
Sure.
She had 44 seconds left.
Generally, you're allowed one public comment, and in the order of things, the public comment comes before the board discussion. Again, the board has discretion if they'd like to hear something, but generally speaking, this would be allowing a second public comment in response to board discussion, which is not generally something the board allows.
Okay. So, unfortunately, we can't allow your additional comment. Okay.
And then just make sure if there's any rebuttal or cross-examination regarding the additional public comment.
Yes. Staff, do you have any rebuttal?
No.
Okay. And the applicant?
The only thing I'd point back to is that the dolphin pilings that we're proposing to extend 62 feet are literally immediately next to the dolphin pilings that are 62 feet out there currently. So they aren't going to have any kind of an impact to the waterway.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any board discussion from the second comment or rebuttal?
No.
Okay. Hearing that, we can begin reading the board order.
So, Chair, because we have 3 variances, we'll be doing 3 orders. As a reminder, and also for our newer members, the land development regulations require at least 5 votes for a variance to be approved. So it's not a simple majority. I'll begin by reading the board order. We'll start with the finger peer request. I will read each of the 6 elements that you've heard both from staff and the applicant. After each element, Ms. Miller will conduct a roll call, and they're written in a way so that if you believe that the evidence supports granting the variance, the response would be a yes. After we go through all 6, if there's been positive findings made by 5 members for all 6, then we would entertain a motion to approve that variance. If a board member wants to consider the conditions that were discussed, that would be the time to add that condition. Okay. This is the Board of Adjustment final board order for file number 2024-233, the November 7th, 2024 Board of Adjustments meeting for the address of 384 Captain's Walk. It's consideration of a variance request in Land Development Regulations Section 7.98 to allow a finger pier to extend 28 feet 7 inches from the property line into the C-15 canal. Pursuant to Land Development Regulations Section 24.11A5, following consideration of all the evidence and testimony, the Board of Adjustments for the City of Delray Beach finds as follows. 1, that special conditions and circumstances exist that are peculiar to the land structure or building involved and which are not generally applicable to other land structures or buildings subject to the same zoning. Ms. Miller?
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slasser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Tia Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
2, that literal interpretation of the regulations would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties subject to the same zoning.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slasser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
3, that the special conditions and circumstances have not resulted from actions of the applicant.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slasser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
4, that granting the variance will not confer onto the applicant any special privilege that is denied to other land, structures, and buildings under the same zoning.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slasser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
No.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
5, that the reasons established in the variance petition justify the granting of the variance and that the variance is a minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slasser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
No.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
And 6, that the granting of the variance will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the existing regulations, will not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slasser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
Okay, as a board, you have determined that all 6 elements were met by at least 5-member vote. At this time, I need a motion to approve the variance request for the finger pier.
I'll make that motion.
As chair, you actually cannot.
Okay.
I
Rescinded.
will make this motion.
I'll second it.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slasser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
Okay. Chair, the next board order I will read is the variance request for the boat lift. This is the Board of Adjustment final board order for the November 7th, 2024 Board of Adjustments meeting for file number 2024-233 for the property located at 384 Captain's Walk. It's consideration of a variance request of the Land Development Regulations Section 7.9.11A to allow a boat lift in the raised position to be located 26 feet 11 inches from the property line. Pursuant to Land Development Regulations Section 2.4.11A5, following consideration of all the evidence and testimony, the Board of Adjustment for the City of Delray Beach finds as follows. 1, that special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved and which are not generally applicable to other land, structures, or buildings subject to the same zoning.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slasser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
2, that literal interpretation of the regulations would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties subject to the same zoning.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slasser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
3, that the special conditions and circumstances have not resulted from the actions of the applicant.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slasser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Tiana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
4, that granting the variance will not confer onto the applicant any special privilege that is denied to other land, structures, and buildings under the same zoning.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slusser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Diana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
5, that the reasons established in the variance petition justify the granting of the variance and that the variance is the minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slusser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
No.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Diana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
And 6, that the granting of the variance will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of existing regulations, will not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slusser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Diana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
Okay, again, the board has determined that all 6 elements were met. Could we get a motion to approve the boat lift variance?
Motion to approve?
Seconded.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slusser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Diana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
Last, Chair, we have the variance order for the Dolphins. This is the Board of Adjustment final board order for the November 7th, 2024 Board of Adjustments meeting, file number 2024-233 for the property located at 384 Captain's Walk. It's consideration of a variance request, Land Development Regulations, Section 7.97C, to allow 4 dolphins to extend up to 62 feet from the property line into the C-15 canal. Pursuant to Land Development Regulations, Section 2.4.11A5, following consideration of all the evidence and testimony, the Board of Adjustments for the City of Delray Beach finds as follows. 1, that special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land structure or building involved and which are not generally applicable to other land structures or buildings subject to the same zoning.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slusser,
William, Mr. Bennett. Can we clarify that it's 5 dolphins, not 4? I apologize. Thank you.
Yes, this is for the 5 dolphins to extend to 62 feet. I believe we were on roll call for element number 1, I believe, Diane, right?
Right.
Correct.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slusser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Diana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
2, that the literal interpretation of the regulations would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties subject to the same zoning.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slusser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Diana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
3, that the special conditions and circumstances have not resulted from actions of the applicant.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slusser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Diana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
4, that granting the variance will not confer onto the applicant any special privilege that is denied to other land structures and buildings under the same zoning.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slusser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Diana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
5, that the reasons established in the variance petition justify the granting of the variance and that the variance is a minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slusser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
No.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Diana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
And 6, that the granting of the variance will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of existing regulations, will not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slusser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Diana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
Chair, the board has found that all 6 elements were met. Could you please get a motion to approve the Dolphins variance?
Motion to approve?
I'll second it.
John DeLacio,
Yes.
Jesse Slusser,
Yes.
Mark Ronald,
Yes.
Brenda Cullinan,
Yes.
Diana Morales is absent, Richard Kasser,
Yes.
Alec Hayes.
Yes.
Pursuant to LDR Section 2.17F, all decisions of the Board of Adjustments are final. Chair, that concludes reading of the board orders.
Thank you very much for your time. I certainly appreciate it.
Okay. we move on to reports and comments. So do we have any staff comments?
So we do have a new board member, and I am not sure if you received, if you received the email for your board training.
Yes.
You've completed that? Okay, wonderful. And Diane so kindly placed the 2025 meeting schedule up on the dais for you all. There is a clarification for the June meeting. It is June 5th. June 6th is a Friday.
Can I ask for a copy? I don't see a copy.
5th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
And our next meeting date is tentative to be December 5th, 2024.
Okay. All right. No more staff comments?
Not at this time.
Okay. Any attorney comments?
Just a reminder, especially for Mr. Ronald, who's new to the board, we do have certain forms and trainings that have to be completed. It should be all sent to your city email address. So if
I've done all that.
Okay, perfect, great. And just a reminder, the ethics training does need to be renewed every so often. So if you're concerned that maybe you need to do it, feel free to reach out to Ms. Miller or the clerk's office and let you know if that's something that needs to be accomplished. But if it needs to be renewed, you should have received an email. So, but nothing further, Chair.
Okay. Thank you. And any board comments?
I have a question which may or may not be appropriate, so if you can't answer it, so be it. I'm learning, so forgive me. And I don't want to rehash this one, but just in general, those questions that are asked are all obviously a little different with regard to the things we should consider. And one of them, and you might wonder, why did I say no? Because in some instances, you just couldn't put a boat there. Or build a house, or, you know, there's no water. So if you don't get a variance, you can't build a house because it's not practical to build a house without water or electricity. In some instances, it may be that you want to have a boat, just arbitrarily. Well, clearly, if you're on the water, as in this instance, this house could have a boat. If we granted nothing, this house would have a boat. So my reading of the question is, are we denying him a boat? In case you're wondering why I said no. And these questions are all quite different. I think we're going through them because you all have much more experience than I do. But I have a fair amount of experience on boards and questions and sitting in a chair of meetings like this. And it would seem to me that we can answer no to certain questions and still grant the variance, can we not? We could conceivably say no to all those questions and still grant the variance, could we not?
So with a quasi-judicial hearing, there has to be evidence that supports findings.
Mm-hmm.
And in the land development regulations, it says specifically that 5 members must vote in the affirmative in order for a variance to be granted. So if, in theory, tonight, just one of the 6 elements had been a 4-2, then you as a board are saying only 4 of us think this variance should be granted. And that's a finding that's required in order to grant that variance.
Even though we subsequently vote for the variance itself.
Correct, yeah.
The vote for the variance is more of a formality pursuant to what the findings were, as opposed to having discretion on the vote itself.
Yeah, so for instance, when you voted no on one of the elements, you are in essence saying, I don't believe that they've established the 6 things they have to, and so the variance should not be granted. But when we do the motion, you as a board have determined that those elements were met. And so it's my recommendation that when we go through that exercise at the end for the motion to approve, that the board vote as the board found. And so as a board, you found that all the elements were met. And so even though you personally found that they failed to establish one of those elements, I would recommend generally that you vote to approve in an instance like this, because as a board, that's what the determination has been made.
Which I did.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But you raise an interesting point, because I do always ask myself when some of these variances, it's would we be better off denying the variance, and then if we thought it was still reasonable, petitioning the city to change the code. And I think in this instance, given the neighborhood, and I don't want to talk about the case, but when I generally see all of the other, several instances in that neighborhood that are in there, I'm like, I wouldn't recommend changing the code to accommodate what everyone else is doing. But
Yeah, I understand. I agree.
Delray, I always like that. Delray's interesting because the precedence doesn't really come into play.
Well, it's not necessarily a Delray, limited to Delray either. It's just that, generally speaking, especially in the law, nothing is more unique than property, because any slight change, this board might have voted differently if there weren't 63-foot long dolphins, or dolphins already 63 feet out. So maybe the person 5 houses down will say, hey, you just did it for them, but they don't have an existing condition that already interjects into the canal. So every piece of property is unique and different. So even if something is substantially similar, it's not identical. So there's not really a quote-unquote precedence in the way you might feel in the law where something always has to be the same. Here, every piece of property is different. Every application is different. And so just because this was approved tonight does not mean that when we meet in December or January, if there's a similar property with similar requests, that that this board has to follow any specific vote they've done in the past.
Understood, but nonetheless, it's a slippery slope, particularly if nobody has anything, any variance whatsoever. The first, and somebody wants to go out 65 feet, and the rule was, 25 feet? I would guess it would be harder to get yeses from this group.
yeah, the math, again, I guess not talking specific cases, but if 25 was set on 100, I kind of like scaled up, okay, if it's 217, what does that get you on a proportionate? Yeah. It's still not 62, but it's close enough. I wasn't going to nitpick.
Yeah.
In theory.
Okay, are there any other board comments? All right. Well, ready to adjourn.
Yep, you don't need a motion. The chair just says it.
All right, meeting adjourned.